let's wrap things up. It's the Washington Commanders, a light draft because of some of the aggressive moves they've made over the last year, trying to get bringing in Marshawn Lattimore, Deebo Samuel. First rounder is Josh Conerly, the tackle out of Oregon. They go Trey Amos, the corner out of Ole Miss. And only 5 picks total. Jaylin Lane, the wide receiver from Virginia Tech. That's their 4th rounder. Kain Medrano, the linebacker out of UCLA. And then a Mike Renner favorite that you seem to like too when you watched him. I did as well. Running back Jacory Croskey-Merritt out of Arizona. That's their 7th round pick in Washington.
Love that as a 7th round pick. I mean, I was buying the hype that people were putting out there that he might go on day 2. He could sneak into day 2 and certainly at the top of day 3 with a 4th rounder. To get him in the 7th, I think is an absolute steal. I think he could immediately contribute as a significant player in that backfield rotation. So that's great. Josh Conerly in the 1st round, I think is a good pick. Again, offensive linemen were flying off the board. I think consensus, it's almost right around where he was supposed to go. He was like consensus 31, something like that. So they got him, a pick over that or whatever, a pick or 2 above that. Trey Amos in the 2nd round. I think corners were sliding for some reason in this draft relative to where we thought they might go. So one of the better value picks in the draft, I think. Love Jaylin Lane as well. The Senior Bowl, Jaylin Lane was the guy giving Darian Porter all the problems, sort of exposing him to, hey, this is what happens when you get a quick route running type of wide receiver. 6'3", 195 suddenly starts to become a bit of an issue the way it normally is from people. Jaylin Lane was really the first guy to expose that. And then, like the 6th rounder and 7th rounder. This is a really good draft. The only quibble is how many times they picked, and we know where those draft picks went. At least a couple of them went on players that should make a significant positive impact for them this season.
I think we all do this when we look at drafts. When you see 5 players, chances are it's tough for you to look at it and say, yeah, this was a great draft. When you see 12, it's a lot easier, right? Because chances are there's 4 or 5 players that you really like in there. But I really like the players at these spots for what they had. Conerly in the late 1st. I think there's, what they did this offseason. I think they had a left tackle need. Brandon Coleman was a 3rd rounder last year. He started a bunch of games there. He had his ups and downs. He's either a better guard or he's just not ready yet. I don't think a tackle. So they trade for Laremy Tunsil. Those are the 3 aggressive moves. Why did they have 5 picks? Laremy Tunsil trade, Marshawn Lattimore trade during the season, and then Deebo Samuel for a 5. Not that aggressive, but that's why they only had 5 picks. But to get a Conerly who can step in and maybe compete at right tackle with Brandon Coleman, and then to get a Trey Amos at corner where you have Marshawn Lattimore, you have 1 year of Jonathan Jones, and you have Mike Sanderstill. Sanderstill's still probably better at nickel than outside. I think Amos can compete right away on the outside with Jonathan Jones and or give you some Marshawn Lattimore insurance because Lattimore is getting older and looked like he was a little bit last year. So those were 2 good picks. And Jaylin Lane he's fast, man. He's another one of those speed receivers in this draft that can add a different element to this offense with Terry McLaurin, with Deebo Samuel. I think there's a path to Lane just being that deep threat now that De'Ami Brown's not there anymore. So I think the top 3 picks, first and 2nd round, and then 4th round, all have roles to play on this team currently. And then Croskey-Merritt, bring him into the mix. He had some of the on-field metrics as far as acceleration and deceleration. You could see how sharp he cuts, but it was actually quantified at the Shrine Bowl, and he had the very best deceleration or whatever the metrics were. They were all in his favor. That hey, he looks shifty and good, which you see on film from him anyway. So. He only played. He came out of New Mexico, transferred to Arizona. Only played 1 game last year, and looked pretty slick. I remember Renner brought him up mid-season to me, and Renner was pounding the table for him to even get to the Shrine Bowl, and getting him on people's radars to the point where he got hyped up, maybe too much. And you get him in the 7th and throw him into the mix with Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler. So I like that quite a bit from the Commanders' perspective.
All right, that's enough of that, Steve. Over 50% of the people listening to this are not subscribed right now. So click that button, and then we can get back to whatever it is Steve's telling you about. He's a great example of why people love this running back class. Like, he's a 7th round pick, and he could legitimately end up as a starter for this team. Like, he's got that kind of ability. Now, maybe he won't. There's risks attached to it as well. But for a 7th round pick, again, when you hit the 7th round, you're just throwing darts. And most of these guys have got no shot whatsoever of working out. But you can paint a very quick, easy picture of how he could be a useful part of this offense.
And we do this all the time, and we say, well, in draft class grades, most people are not saying, where did they use their picks in trades, right? Most people are not doing that necessarily. But you do have to go back and say, okay, the trade for Tunsil, the trade for Deebo Samuel, the trade for Marshawn Lattimore, that's where they spent a lot of this draft capital. And that is what they can do with Jayden Daniels, right? You have your quarterback, you have your first contract quarterback. So you're going to use your draft picks essentially to not only bring in established stars, but guys that you can pay, right? That you can afford to take on Lattimore's contract, Tunsil's contract, Deebo Samuel's contract. So the Jayden Daniels thing frees you up. So like Deebo for a 5, to me, that's a no-brainer, right? I love a good 5th-round pick, but we know the hit rate on them is low. Maybe you get Shedeur Sanders in the 5th sometimes. But the hit rate on those guys is low, and you bring in Deebo Samuel again, even though he was not coming off his best season. He's just 2 years removed from being one of the best players in the NFL. That's well worth the risk with a 5, and you have the cap space to do it. So Adam Peters, really nice job, I think, over the last couple of years. And then you pair that with the 1-year contract for Bobby Wagner, the 1-year contract for Zach Ertz, right? They are filling their roster with, 1-year veterans, long-term stars, we'll say, in Tunsil and Deebo and Lattimore. And then I think doing a really nice job in the draft, just like they did last year, high volume draft where they got a lot of contributors. So I think continues to move in the right direction this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing, Jaylin Lane brings return ability as well. It can be a kick returner and a punt returner for them. And again, kick returns are theoretically being valued more this year because the line for the touchback line is moving out. We should see more kick returns. So kick returners are becoming more valuable again. So Jaylin Lane brings that to the table as well. Arif Hassan's value model relative to the consensus board, Washington has Washington as the second best draft in the NFL. There's only one more valuable draft effectively than Washington. No individual pick of theirs was like steal of the draft type of territory, but just their picks consistently good value.
And low volume drafts never show up well in grading, right? I'm guilty as well because I like high volume drafts. So they tied for 19th in Renee's GPA there, the Commanders, ranging from A to C plus. Thor had him as a C plus. Believe he was the lowest grader there. But it's because they had 5 picks. I can't imagine people didn't like the picks a whole lot, even if they didn't love them. And then that's where I am. I think they're good. They're all solid picks at where they got those players. I'm a big fan of Trey Amos. I think there's a lot of potential there. I wouldn't even have hated Amos in the first round. So to me, they got 2 players that I would have been happy taking in the first round, in Josh Conerly and Trey Amos. But they only had 5 picks, and I think that's going to hurt the GPA because that's just how people's minds work. And certainly, and most people don't say, well, the 5th round was Deebo and this one was Tunsil. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts to get Tunsil and Lattimore there, but nobody's factoring that in grades. So that's why they end up at 19th.
Yeah, I go back and forth on whether that's a fair way of viewing it as well, whether you should factor in the players that you've traded for as a sort of draft in its holistic terms. Thor almost individually cost the Patriots the top spot on the consensus rankings, by the way. Like everyone has him as an A of some description, except Thor gave him a C+. That almost was enough to drag them behind the Giants.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.